Welcome to the Brookline Interactive Group's YouTube channel. My name is Yvonne, and I had the incredible opportunity to speak with Cory Doctorow. He is a celebrated science fiction author, journalist, and technology activist who is known for his thought-provoking work on digital rights, the internet, and the future of technology. Cory has written numerous acclaimed books, including Little Brother, How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism, and his latest novel, Pigs and Shovels. Beyond his fiction, he's an advocate for internet freedom, a key voice in the fight against monopolies. His work bridges the road of storytelling and activism, making complex tech issues accessible and urgent to all people. In our conversation, we discuss Pigs and Shovels, the real-world issues that inspire it, and what it means for the future of the digital economy. It was an insightful and engaging discussion that I'm excited to share with you.
Hello, Cory. I'm Yvonne. I'm an intern at Brookline Interactive Group. It's really great to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to have an interview with me. And we're going to talk about your new novel, Pigs and Shovels.
Terrific.
Okay, so I already came up with a few questions, and I would just read it through and see which one do you want to start with.
Just start with whichever one you'd like to start with. That's fine.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one. So your book, Pigs and Shovel, is a really interesting title. I don't know this phrase before, and I'm wondering what's the book about and what does the title connect to its theme?
So the book is a historical techno-thriller, which is a weird subgenre. I think I might be the only one doing it, but it's a thriller about new technology from the 1980s. So it's about the early years of the PC. And when the PC was first invented, it was a very mysterious object. No one really knew what it was for, or who was supposed to make it, or who was supposed to buy it, or how you were supposed to use it. And I have this recurring character I've written several novels about now, Martin Hench, who is a forensic accountant. That's someone who finds fraud. He's kind of a detective character. And when we first meet him in the book Red Team Blues, he's 67 years old and retiring, but you learn that he's been doing this for 40 years. And he was there with the birth of the PC. And so this is his first adventure when the PC started. And the adventure starts here in Boston.
Wow.
He's an MIT kid who is too busy programming computers to do his computer science homework. So he flunks out of MIT. And he ends up just becoming a kind of freelancer working on early software projects. And that's how he ends out in Silicon Valley. And as I said, this was the era of the very weird PC. And he ends up embroiled with a very weird PC company, a company called Fidelity Computing that's run by a Mormon bishop, an Orthodox rabbi, and a Catholic priest, which sounds like the setup to a funny joke, but what they're actually doing is they're running a scam. It's a multi-level marketing scheme that preys on faith groups to sell these crappy PCs that are designed to just pick your pocket. So they only take a special kind of floppy disk that costs 10 times as much as a regular floppy disk. And they've gone into the printers, and this was back when you couldn't just put regular paper in a printer. You had printers, paper that was folded, and then it had these sprockets up the side, and it would roll up like that. And they've made the sprockets a little wider. So you have to buy special paper for the printer that costs 10 times as much. And so these guys, they're running this scam operation. Marty ends up working for their competitors, who are three women who've left Fidelity Computing, started their own company called Computing Freedom that's just helping people unlock these computers, move their software over to another computer, move their data over, fix their printers so it takes anyone's paper, whatever. And they are an Orthodox woman who's been kicked out of her family because she's gay, a Mormon woman who's left the church because of the opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, and a nun who's become a communist and involved with the liberation theology movement in Central America. So it's this rivalry that starts off as a commercial rivalry, but of course the kind of men who run a national fraud are not just dishonest, they're violent. And so it becomes a violent clash between these two companies. And the reason it's called Picks and Shovels is that every time there is a tech bubble, which we're living through now with AI, But we also had one a little while ago with metaverse, and we had another one before that with crypto, and we've had so many tech bubbles. Every time there's a tech bubble, the people who are trying to get rich doing the tech bubble, they run around and they say, we are not actually making a company. We are supplying things to the companies. So we're not making AI, we're making GPUs, we're NVIDIA. We're not making a metaverse, we're making tools to make the metaverse with. And they always say the same thing. They say that during the California gold rush, most of the miners went broke, but the people who the picks and shovels got rich. And so this is always, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, right? Everyone just says this in order to raise money because they think it makes investors feel confident. And so this is about this picks and shovels era of the PC in this moment where there was a huge PC bubble and no one knew what they were supposed to do.
So this this question lead to another question is that, is it because like your main character, Martin Hench, is going to retire in your first book so that you're going to write a prequel instead of a sequel?
Yeah, kind of. So look, I write when I'm anxious. And so during the COVID years, the lockdown years, I sat in my backyard. I live in Los Angeles. I sat in my backyard in a hammock and I wrote 9 books.
Wow.
And one of them was Red Team Blues. And I had this very weird conceit for the book. I thought, what if you wrote the last volume in a long-running beloved series with 25 books in it that had a character that people had loved for, you know, their whole adult lives? What if you wrote just the last volume and didn't bother with the other 24 books? So just the end. And it was just a fun idea. And it happened really quick. I wrote the book in like 6 weeks. And I sent it to my editor, and he loved it. The next morning, he sent me an email. So he read it overnight. He sent me an email the next morning. It just said, that was a ride. Whoa. And he bought 3 of them. And I had to figure out what to do because at the end of the book, Marty Hench retires. And he's really earned his retirement. He's had a long and storied career. He ends the book in a very happy place with love and money and everything he needs. And so I didn't want to bring him out of retirement. That just felt cruel. And I realized that you could tell these stories in any order, that you did not have to tell them chronologically. And that, in fact, if you told them out of chronological sequence, you didn't have to worry about continuity because you always had a chance like to write an intermediate volume that explained why something was true here and not true here, that made it all seem to fit together. And that, in fact, the more you just sort of made stuff up and then connected it later, the more like premeditated and kind of Machiavellian you seemed, even if you're just pulling it out of your butt. So this has been very successful. I've written 3 of these books now. I've got about 3 more with notes for them that I'm writing other books right now. I'm writing a nonfiction book. I've just turned in a nonfiction book and I'm about to do a graphic novel and I've got an art book I want to do. But when I get back to novels, I would be interested in telling more of these stories. I've got some really fun ones I want to tell about Marty Hench.
A thing that I'm wondering is like, so you set out to write the last book of a series of books, but you ended up like selling 3 of them.
Yeah.
Why was it like that? Why did you decide to like sell 3 of them?
Oh, well, my editor asked for it. He just said, I will pay you a lot of money to write 3 of these. I will pay you some money to just have 1 of these, but I'll pay you a lot of money to write 3 of these. I was like, okay. And my initial thought was, okay, I'll go write 2 more that'll come beforehand and we'll publish them in chronological order. So I'll wait, like it'll take me a couple of years. So we'll publish the first one in 2 years and then the second one in 3 years. And then in 4 years, we'll have Red Team Blues. And then I realized I didn't have to do that, there's no reason they have to go in chronological sequence, right? Like the only thing that writing out of chronological sequence takes away is you can be sure when you start the book that the character isn't going to die because you know they come back later. But in reality, if you're reading a series of detective novels, you know the character isn't going to die, right? But, you know, and if they were, it would be a big deal. The publisher would have been making, you know, the final adventure, he dies in this one, you know? So you can be like, you're sure in Harry Potter #4 that he's not going to die. Like you just know it, right? Yeah. Maybe you don't know if he's going to die in book 7, but you're sure in book 4 that he's not going to die. James Bond is not going to die. And so, yeah, you lose a little bit of dramatic tension, but not much.
I think this is really interesting.
Well, thank you.
So I wonder like how this novel, Picks and Shovels, to connect with your past work in activism and technology.
Well, the premise of this book really is that when the computer was invented, about 30% of the people who saw it were like, I'm going to use this to set everyone free, to give them privacy, to give them an easy way to communicate, to bypass gatekeepers, to have, what Steve Jobs called a bicycle for the mind. And about 70% of people who looked at it said, I'm going to figure out how to use this to get rich at other people's expense. I'm going to spy on them. I'm going to control them. I'm going to manipulate them. I'm going to lock them in. And this has been the struggle between good and evil in technology since the beginning of the personal technology era, really since the beginning of the digital computer, since the 50s. I have fought that fight now for about half my life. So I had my 23rd anniversary with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, an activist group that was founded here in Cambridge, but now is based in San Francisco. I've spent 25 years trying to explain to people why these digital policy issues matter. And people will eventually figure out why they matter on their own. I could stop doing that job and people would, I could stop doing that job and people would eventually wake up and say, this stuff is important. And the reason they would do that is their lives would have been destroyed by it. In the same way that no environmentalist needs to convince people that climate change is real. You could just wait 50 years, and when 30% of people are dead from fires, floods, zoonotic plagues, everyone would know climate change was real and important. The trick as an activist is to get people to care about it before it's a cataclysm, right? And what writing fiction does is it helps me, among other things, helps me carry on the argument in ways that are less abstract, more concrete, more emotive, that speak to a different part of how people think about the world. And science fiction in particular is a great genre for this because it's a genre of exposition. And there are some people who don't like that, and that's fine. But I think exposition is great. I think exposition well done is really cool. And in fact, it's hard, right? It's like why people say, I don't like books with exposition is it's hard to do good exposition. It's hard not to be boring. And so we've encountered a lot of bad exposition, but when exposition is great, it's amazing. It is endlessly fascinating and captivating. And I think I'm good at it. And so science fiction as a genre is quite tolerant of exposition. And I think I get a special, I get it to do it a little more easily than other writers because when I'm doing exposition, it is either directly or metaphorically connected to some really important policy issue that's already playing out in people's lives about privacy, self-determination, and so on. And that means that the exposition is salient, like it matters to people. And it's much easier to get people interested in things that matter, right? If you're writing about how the wizard in your fantasy novel gets to cast spells, how long they have to rest, and which owl feathers they have to collect, and so on, none of that matters, right? It could still be interesting, but it's much harder to make interesting because it's not real, right? It doesn't matter in any particular way. Like Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, he wrote this book called The Silmarillion, which no one has read because it is painfully boring. And it is a history of Middle-earth. So it's all the things that happened before The Hobbit starts. And it's just like wars and political machinations and natural disasters that never happened to a place that doesn't exist, to characters that you never meet, right? It's just like recounted like a dry history. So it's like hearing about like the history of the Napoleonic Wars or, some great dynastic feud in the Far East or whatever, except it never happened. So it's like listening to someone tell you their dreams, right? It's very hard to get interested in someone else's dreams because it does not matter, right? It's just made up. So I think the exposition that I do, which connects very directly to these policy questions, that exposition is interesting, at least for the readers who like that kind of work. And it advances the political argument in ways that I could never do if I confined myself just to nonfiction.
Yeah, sure. One thing that I'm really curious about is like I'm a Gen Z reader, and is there any message that you want to say to the reader, or things that you think that I, as a Gen Z reader, can take away from this book?
Yeah, so Douglas Adams, the guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he once said, anything invented before you were 18 was always there. Anything invented between the age of 18 and 30 is incredible and is going to change the world. And anything invented after you're 30 is evil and needs to be destroyed. And I think that it's very easy to arrive on stage. So can I ask what year you were born?
2003.
So you can arrive, that's the same age, you're the same age as my daughter. Well, no, she's 2008, I beg your pardon. So you can arrive on stage in 2003 with the internet seemingly fully formed around you. And you can grow up and think, there's only one way the internet can be. It is this way. It was determined to be this way by the great forces of history, and it will never change. This is just it. And what I want you to understand, and what I want just normies more broadly, because I think a lot of people came upon the internet, even if they're my age, came upon the internet in the early 2000s because it wasn't very popular before then, and they found something fully cooked. And I want people to understand that it's contingent, that it didn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way in the future. That all of the bad things that we encounter on the internet, all of the things that make us crazy about these services that we rely on, are the result of policy choices that we can identify made by named individuals who are mostly still alive, who were warned at the time that if they made these stupid choices, these bad things would happen, who are today wealthy and comfortable, and who've never been held to account. And once you realize all of those things, well, then you might start trying to guess what size pitchfork they wear, right? And you know what they would look like if they were stripped of all honor, monetary rewards, and social standing, and treated like the pariahs that they should be for having made these callow, disgusting choices that made them so very wealthy. So I think that once you encounter this idea that stuff is up for grabs, that we don't have to take it, that you can change it, that it didn't have to be this way, that this becomes the precursor for a different kind of world.
I feel like fiction is really powerful for us, like to imagine a world that I didn't live in, but like maybe imagine the history of the past.
Sure. And this book, to be clear, it's set in a time when I was 10 years old. I wasn't there. I wasn't living through that. I saw the other side of it, right? My dad was a computer scientist. We had an early computer in the house, and I had a modem, and I was dialing up to bulletin board systems, and I was encountering at a remove, I grew up in Toronto, so I was encountering at some remove, thousands of miles on a national border, what people were doing in San Francisco. And then in the years that followed, I had the good fortune to work with some of these people. I lived in the Bay Area. I immersed myself to a large extent in these histories. And I really became conversant with what was going on the other side. And so this is in some ways my reconstruction of what the adults were doing that made my childhood what it was.
There's an additional question that I would like to ask
Sure.
is that I'm from Brookline Interactive Group. It is a community-based media and technology group, and I wonder what is the strength of community-based group in this case, or community cable TV have again strength with big commercial platform like YouTube or Facebook. What is something that we can do to increase maybe digital equity or people's access to internet?
So things like YouTube work very well, but they fail very badly. So YouTube works great if the stuff that you want to publish is stuff that YouTube's algorithm today likes. that no one tries to remove from YouTube with a fake copyright complaint, that sort of fits into the YouTube-shaped hole in the internet. And the problem is that if what you're making isn't what the algorithm favors today, if someone decides to maliciously file a copy strike against you and get it removed, you have little recourse and few alternatives. I mean, yes, today we have TikTok and Instagram, but it's still pretty thin, right? The idea that there's like 3 places is pretty thin. And the existence of worker-owned, worker-controlled workplaces or institutions, whether we're talking about like a print shop or a factory or a media production company, means that there is a place where the judgment of people who are making things and the conduits by which they approach an audience can be had without the filter of things that are either profitable or palatable to a large tech firm, which, like, I just don't think that the sum total of all the things that the human race should see is the same thing as all the things that YouTube can profitably host. And we've seen this with other kinds of investigative media co-ops. So in the last couple of years, there's been a widespread collapse of these big media outlets like Vice, Motherboard, and BuzzFeed, and so on, where there's been these huge layoffs. Sometimes the whole service is shut down. And in many cases, journalists, investigative journalists from these firms have formed cooperatives or independent journalist-owned businesses to do reporting, to do the work they used to do for their bosses. And it's really good. In fact, it's better than it was with the imperatives of their old bosses' growth-oriented mindset, where they had to post higher and higher numbers every week and so on, where these people are pursuing the things that they think their audience wants to see, but also that they think is important for their audience to see. So I look at something like 404 Media, which is people who are veterans of Vice, Motherboard, their tech vertical. They're putting up more scoops every week than they ever did at Vice. And there's just 4 of them, and they are hustling their butts off, and they're doing amazing reporting. And not only that, but they do like weekly behind the scenes where they explain how they do their reporting for anyone else who wants to start a co-op like theirs. Right? Here's how we do freedom of information requests. Here's how we manage legal liability when reporting on corruption, right? All these things that if you're an independent journalist, you might not know. And it's so much better than the work they did when they were at Vice. And it makes you realize that in many cases, the institutional support that journalists have or that creative workers have can be as much of an impediment as it is a help. It can actually be a drag on their ability to produce. You know, there's a joke about a writer and an editor. And this is not a joke about my editor, who I love very much, but a joke about a writer and an editor who are lost in the desert. They're dying of thirst. And they're about to expire when they happen upon an oasis, a pool of crystal clear blue water. And the writer falls to their knees and praises the fates for having taken them to this pool and saved their lives. And then the writer turns and the editor is urinating in the pool. And the writer says to the editor, "What are you doing?" And the editor says, "Don't worry, I'm making it better." And there are definitely instances in which the editorial judgment of that arises out of commercial imperatives, whether it's algorithmic or human, is like pissing in the oasis.
Mm-hmm. So maybe people from like independent journalists get more creativity, and they could do a better job alone without.
Sometimes, right? There are just things that you can do independently or in a cooperative that you can't do under a commercial roof, and vice versa, right? You are never going to have, with your scrappy cable access TV or local co-op, you're never going to have the resources of an ABC affiliate. Yeah. But you're also never going to have the constraints of an ABC affiliate.
Yeah.
You know, and the problem isn't that there are restaurants like McDonald's. The problem is when there's only restaurants like McDonald's.
Oh yeah. So like it is good to have other platforms
Sure.
other than the
Yeah.
YouTube.
But you want them to be disciplined by the existence of a whole kind of ecosystem of different kinds of news and media, so that if they do poorly, if they make mistakes, people have somewhere else to go, and if they don't, then they don't face the discipline of losing audience. That there used to be on Saturday Night Live on the comedy show, there was a comedian called Lily Tomlin, and she would do these funny pretend ads for AT&T. This was back when there was only one phone company in America, AT&T, before Ronald Reagan broke them up in 1982. And she would pretend to be an AT&T operator doing a pitch for AT&T. And at the end of every one of these fake commercials, she would turn to the camera and she would say, "We don't care. We don't have to. We're the phone company." Right? And when there's only one option, they don't care, they don't have to. We're seeing this with Google, right? Google used to be a very good search engine, and now it is a very bad search engine. And the thing that seems to be driving that is Google having a 90% market share.
Yeah. It's really important to have competitor.
Yeah. Well, to have a source of discipline, to have something that stops you. I mean, this is the risk to independence, and it's the value of being independent. So the risk to independence is if there's no one around to tell you when you want to do something very stupid, you might do something very stupid. The amazing thing about being independent is that if there's something that everyone thinks is stupid but is actually great, you can do it. And the thing about an independent person is that if they screw up, it doesn't hurt anyone else because they're small, right? Whereas when Elon Musk takes too much ketamine and dismantles the American government, a lot of us get hurt. And so you have a source of discipline in independence that comes from scale. When you have large firms without any source of discipline, no regulation, no labor discipline because they don't have unions, no competitors, no threat of interoperable technology that does things like blocks their ads or does other things that undermines their bad choices, then they are free to pursue what they think is best for them at the expense of everyone else without fear of any consequences. That's really dangerous.
Yeah, that's really. So I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, and best of luck to your new novel, Picks and Shovels. I'm sure that the readers will love it.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.